So we're glad that you're here. You are in Museum Minds, whoever just joined. Go ahead. I'm going to type this mute all. Everybody is now forced to be muted. All right, you are in the right place. This is Museum Minds. We're so excited that you're here. We do a free monthly meetup every single month, all about goodness for museum folks. So, Rainey, do you want to give the lowdown of why we're doing this and how we started this? Oh, you're muted too. I muted everyone, including you.
You muted me, Beth.
You that has the
Um,
background noise, though.
I would be happy to. So basically, Museum Minds. Well, let me back up a little bit more. Beth and I met in a mastermind a couple years ago, and we've been working together off and on. We have two different businesses, but we talk a lot, and we actually joke that we work in cubicles next to each other because we just are on Zoom that much together. But anyway, about a year ago, which we'll talk about in just a minute, we have kind of an anniversary coming up. We started to think, there's a lot of overlap with what we both do and the questions that people are asking us. And we thought, there has to be some sort of space where we could have these conversations. And, whether it's about fundraising or marketing or storytelling like today. And yeah, so we decided to start this monthly meetup, and people show up every month, and we're so thrilled about that. And it's been a really, really great collaboration between the two of us. And add anything else, Beth, if you'd like to.
Of course, of course. I have to say, I love Museum Minds so much because I do feel like it's all that we're just like hanging out in the living room, chatting together, and we're all good friends because so many friendships have started through Museum Minds, as well as a lot of information sharing. And we have our OGs that come back every month and we just know them and they're great people. So, why do they come? Here's a quick run through. They come because of the fact that we always integrate learning into every single Museum Minds. As a past educator myself and things like that, I want people to get a jump start on their knowledge and not have to wait years and years and years to learn all the things. And then have cool stuff sprinkled in too. So we usually spend just a little bit of time in the beginning, intro, do about 25 to 30 minutes of some sort of learning on a topic, quick intermission, which usually is a bit of a commercial break. And then we do 25 minutes or so of networking. So that's the collaborative part where you get to ask questions. You get to plus up answers based on your own experience or your own solutions that you found in the industry. It is a hive mind of goodness here. So that's the good part. All right, so Rainey gave us a little bit of a background about who we are, but again, I'm Beth Hauswert. I run Inspired Impact. I have a museum consulting business where I work primarily with emerging museums and new museum professionals to really jumpstart their industry knowledge and all kinds of other fun consulting things around that. So, Rainey, what do you do?
Well, my name is Rainey Robison, and my business is Neptune Sugar Marketing and Design with the tagline Keeping the Arts Visible. So I primarily work with arts and culture organizations as well as museums of all types, which is why I'm here, to really help them elevate their marketing and take it to the next level in very simple and affordable and easy ways. And it's been just a thrill the last few years doing this.
And
And the
here's
last
Rainey being
year, oh my
our
gosh, I didn't realize you put that
monthly.
GIF in there. I didn't even see that. That's so funny.
You want
Okay.
me to play it again? Let's do it again.
Oh,
Here's
okay.
us. It has been a whole year of us strutting our stuff. Oh my gosh, in Museum Minds. This month marks 1 year of having calls like this every single month. I know. I'm
And
giving
we
my
met in person for
oh,
the first time two months ago, I think. So
pardon me.
we met in person for the first time just a couple months ago too. So that was
Isn't
really
that crazy? This is the beauty of these like online spaces. This is us actually meeting for the first time at the Perez Art Museum in Miami, Florida. So fun, right? So fun. So that's that. All right, so we're going to get started, and I'm going to turn off these slides because today's excitement is all about having a little interview with our new friend, Carrie. So, Rainey, do you want to get us started?
I would love to. So I'm going to do a very brief introduction about how I met Carrie and why I invited her, but I'll allow Carrie to speak for herself as well in terms of her origin story and background. But Carrie was a speaker at a women's conference. I want to say late last year. You were an esteemed speaker, and uh, she walked us through some of, I have your little journal right here called Origin Stories, and she walked us through just a fraction of this booklet and asked us to, identify some life-changing moments and some values that we established in the past. And then I had this kind of eureka moment when she sort of brought it to the present. I started to realize that even though my life looks a lot different, and I have a lot of different goals, and especially as an entrepreneur, they are all being driven by the same values that I was making decisions from years and years and years ago. And so it just kind of was this aha moment where I realized, why I'm doing what I'm doing, and helped me start to articulate a little bit more about my story. And so we're going to dive into that today. So Carrie, do you want to talk about your background?
Hi, everyone. I am so happy to be here with you all. Again, my name is Carrie Cluin, and I am a stage director. And so the world of arts, although a little bit adjacent to museums, is very, very familiar to me. And yeah, so a couple of years ago, I wrote a book called Origin Story, which lives at the crossroads of personal development and storytelling. And that was born from me coaching artists and entrepreneurs for many years on telling their story, personal branding. And so it's evolved into me helping people just think about their own story and or the story of the organization, the company, the product that they're working for and with, and how to strategically use that or feel comfortable with that in order to achieve your future goals. And so I'm really excited to be here and to be in community with you all and think about the stories that we tell ourselves and each other.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Carrie. Uh, One of the things, as Rainey said too, she was at the initial presentation. I wasn't, but I do have my origin stories journal here, or origin story journal, and look through it. And again, just to kind of reiterate, in the work that all of us do, the three of us, not only as a coach have I seen how origin stories really can create meaning and trajectory for individuals on their professional path. But again, working with organizations and strategically thinking about how organizations can tell their own stories in certain ways, because a lot of times there are ups and there are downs and there are stories that you may not really want to bring to light, but then there's other ones that really are pinnacle points in the history of an organization. And how do we do that? So we're really hoping today to go through really like foundational stuff, just to really start you getting thinking about it and start thinking about how you could possibly do that and where do we start. So my first question to Carrie is, what is an origin story?
Yeah, all right. So there's a lot of different ways to think about origin stories, right? There is the superhero, Batman, how I got my start, or even, a villain if you choose to look at it that way, right? The way that I look at origin stories are, as Rainey said earlier, what is that value system that motors you, that drives you, that drew you to this industry, the work that you do, the population that you serve, And how do you tell that story in order to be able to attract that audience or a job that you want to get? I read through the questions that people submitted, and people were talking about, how do I break into this industry? Well, what brings you here? What drives you? Why do you want to do this kind of work? And a lot of us, we have that opportunity to think about that maybe when we're going to college and choosing a major and, or choosing that first job, but we don't take the time to think about how what the work that we're doing now connects back to some of those sparks and those first moments, those core memories of that were imprinted in us that we still think about today. But we might not think about, they might not be in our conscious, they might just be in our subconscious. So I help people to bring those to our conscious.
Love it.
I love that. I'm the next question, right? I wanted to say really quickly, as we move into the next question too, I feel like there's a lot of people out there, especially in marketing, that talk about storytelling. And, there's this, you need to tell your story, you need to tell your story. But just this morning, I was listening to Seth Godin, and he was talking about storytelling as well. And somebody asked him, why is it so hard for us to tell our stories? And he said, well, because everybody is good. Everybody has that fraud complex. Everybody thinks their story isn't important and it doesn't matter, that everybody else's story is more important. So even though, it's this sort of buzzword that goes around, this leads me to the question, why is it important to be able to articulate your own story and your institution's story for that matter?
I really enjoy how you set that up, because it plays right into exactly why I wrote this book. For me, it's all about celebrating originality and our individuality and uniqueness, right? So the mistake that I see a lot of people making when they're trying to write a story is to chase whatever is popular or what they think people want to hear. Okay. Whereas what I'm looking at is what sets you apart, what makes you different. And those of us working in the nonprofit world, we're already on the outskirts, right? So one of my top 3 adjectives, if you think about your personal adjectives for a moment, is quirky. And I absorbed that because I got tired of trying to fit into the corporate landscape. I had led a double life for a while, public relations and marketing background. And you think you have to like fit into this box of, the dark suit and the, very serious and the conservative, etc., right? And I said, I just feel uncomfortable with that. And so once I accepted quirky and even celebrated it, I was free to wear the pink and the artistic, whatever, right? So to answer your question, I think it's extremely important that we dig down to see what sets us apart and how we can then celebrate that. Because I'll tell you a big secret right now about imposter syndrome. You cannot be an imposter when you are being yourself.
Mm.
Right? The definition of imposter is trying to be something you're not, right? And listening to those voices and trying to move towards that, right? That's where the discomfort is. But when you say, hey, I'm quirky, collaborative, and experimental, then you know what you're going to get, and I can celebrate that, and I don't have to feel like an imposter anymore.
Oh, I love that. It makes me think too about things that I've done in the past and doing like a personal assessments or different things like that and getting the results of those things and then leaning in and being like, that's what sets me apart. These are the things that I do best. And maybe I didn't have language to talk about them before in such a succinct way, but these are the things I do best. And just like you, finding those key words to say, that's me, that's why I'm unique, and all these things. So, oh, I love that.
And it
Giving
applies
yourself
to
permission.
it applies to your organizations as well, right?
Mhm.
This is not just, I start on the personal level, but then walk through those layers to then apply that to the organizational or the company. The when you think about somebody that you idolize or you admire, think about what makes them stand out,
Mhm.
right? There are differences, even though they might be working in a certain industry or they might be doing similar kinds of jobs. There are things that you identify as different. So these 7 steps to success are not going to, a couple of them might apply to you, but I guarantee it's not going to be one size fits all.
Right, exactly. Well, you're talking about 7 steps to success. How do we get started? How do we get started on this journey of kind of figuring out what are the core values for ourselves? What are the core values for our organization? How can we start putting these findings into words and doing the kind of digging down deep to figure out what are those things we need to lean into?
So I walk people through basic essential elements, which include character, rising action. I mean, I use like a very typical storytelling structure. But one thing that we can do here today, and I think you probably all received a reminder email that had a word cloud in it. So if you think about a couple of your core values or even just one, I'm going to walk you through a very short little exercise here that'll help you clarify that, which is to think about a moment in time or a core memory that I actually call kryptonite. Okay, so this is like the opposite of a core value. This is a moment that you maybe had an exchange with an employee or a boss or a working environment where you just thought, "Ooh, I cannot think straight. I maybe am acting out of character. I do not want to repeat that situation. I've decided not to stay in that job or with that company or in that relationship," right? So if you think about that, I call that kryptonite because it brings you to your knees, right? It's an anti-value that you cannot function in a healthy way if you are in the vicinity of this kryptonite, right? So that's something to avoid. So if you can think about a moment of that, and then think about uh, what the opposite is of that, or how to remedy that. So I have a really quick example that I like to share. I worked for a boss as a temp who was a cartoonist, a very famous, like New York Times kind of a cartoonist. And I had written up this was back in the typewriter age. I'm aging myself. And had brought him, a letter that I had typed up very beautifully. And he took a look at it and said, only someone very stupid would make a mistake like this, straight at me. And I was like, and I was 20 something, and I was like horrified, mortified. And in that moment of this kryptonite event, which really struck me, I just really decided that respect, right? Because I was disrespected. That was the kryptonite anti-value of that moment, that respect was going to be one of my core values moving forward, and that I would choose to work alongside and with in situations where respect was held up as a core value as well, right? So that I could align my values. Now, the reason that I start with core values in this process is because they can really guide everything, right? They can just guide the decisions that you're making. They can help you decide what story you want to tell, what ingredients you include in that story. And really, they are a way of helping you to share with the world who your character really is, right? Because you can go back and then find moments of when you maybe had to quit a job because you were in an environment where there was disrespect, or, and no one will fault you for having these core values and following them and upholding them, right? So then you start to think about that integrity and your reputation and all of these kinds of things, right? So I really encourage people to look at those core values, but to think also about those moments of kryptonite, those clarifying moments that can really help to guide you in one direction or another.
Oh, I love that reframing. Like so oftentimes in life or even like in the life of an organization, you know, different things happen and you're just like, "Oh my gosh, that was so horrible." And like you can sit there and commiserate with other people and the whole water cooler thing and like it's just so bad and toxic and oh. But to reframe it in the way that you're talking about to say, don't get stuck in the bad and like the other person's trait that's so horrible that makes them horrible, but use that as like this energy and fuel to say that that's not me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
I've had those toxic work environment type things too, or little comments that are said, and you're like, what? Are you kidding me? No, I would never. Ah, I would never.
right,
Because my trait is this.
right,
And you go, girl, or woman, lady, man, whatever, and you do your trait.
right.
I'll let you do that. And that can be your trait, but it's not mine. Ooh.
And this really plays into, there were a couple of questions about reframing history of organizations and along those lines. And this can really come into play in those instances as well, where you say, okay, we're identifying this kryptonite. We're admitting like this is not something we stand for or stand by, but it's in the focus or refocus on those core values that can really help you to navigate those stories, right? Because you're saying, okay, we do not agree with this. Here's where we're going to put our energy, right? And those actions of putting that energy into those core values are what is going to contradict that past, right? You don't really have to defend it and explain it if you are acting consistently in support of those core values, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm, good. I like this. So good. No wonder why Rainey was so inspired to have us meet and talk
And
about.
I didn't mention this earlier, but I went up to Carrie right after her talk and I said, "Oh my gosh, I'm so moved by this." And I asked her, you know, can this also apply to institutions and museums? And she said, "Oh yeah, absolutely." You know, and then, you know, as we've had these conversations too, the leadership in those institutions relates to the institution's story itself as well in the current day. So anyway, we're just so happy to have you here.
Mhm. Yeah, you've definitely dropped a couple of good nuggets for us to talk about so far. Um, and we want to use kind of our second half today. It's normally like Q&A and questions and different things like that. Um, what we're going to do is give Carrie a chance to, if you have like one last nugget before we move into kind of the work section, you're welcome to say that. But what I'm going to do is we're going to put up the word cloud again for everybody to look at in just a few minutes so that if you didn't read your email, I totally get it. If you're overwhelmed with like 27,000 emails, we're going to put that up for a reference again. I did it a little bit earlier, but you'll be able to take a peek at that and kind of start thinking about yourself, your organization, things like that. But before we get into the work, and it was just Super Bowl, Rainey and I were talking about how when we do intermission, we have to say it's a commercial break because we also talk about our businesses for a tiny bit. Everybody has the opportunity to go and get a drink of water or whatever they need to do in between the like sit and listen and then the let's go talk section. So I'm going to bring the slides up real quick. Rainey and I are going to talk about some things that we have moving forward. But first, I'm going to put up that word cloud so that you can start thinking about your words while you're listening to the rest of the goodness that Rainey and I have to bring. I'm going to go ahead and present and share my screen. So here's the word cloud. If you need to take a screenshot or a mental image so that you can continue to think about this, and then I'm going to advance the slide so that we have a little bit more information for Rainey and myself. 5-second countdown. 5, 4, 3.
You can put it up again too. Don't worry.
All right. So, like I said before, Rainey and I are always available to chat. If you thought in our introduction that either of us sounded like something your museum might need, here's a little quick QR code and our websites and emails if you are interested in chatting with us at any point in time.
I'm also putting websites in the chat that
Awesome.
relate to what we're going to talk about right now. And I will also put Carrie's website in there if anyone's interested in contacting Carrie.
And then just real quick, two things that I offer are online workshops all about guest engagement and the science of play. So all the education and goodness that happens in play. My history is I'm a 25-year veteran in museums that are hands-on play-based learning facilities. And I have moved into a realm of really helping out folks get knowledge fast and leveling up their guest engagement, leveling up the why in which they're doing the things, because that really empowers people. So these are two opportunities. They're 60 to 90-minute workshops that really dive in. They are $49 a piece, really low price. I do them every other month. So a really, really great opportunity to get your team all on the same page with consistency and a nice little bump up for your team in the professional development. We have people on the call who are graduates of these workshops. So if you have any questions, you can go ahead and pop them in the chat, and either I or my graduates will go ahead and answer them for you.
Oh, I love
Rain?
that. Yeah, so I also offer online workshops, and this is the first in an upcoming series of my Art Meets Strategy workshops. And you don't have to be in arts and culture necessarily, like if you're a history museum or something like this, it's broad enough to apply to you as well. But over the years, as I've talked to a lot of different museums, and I say, who does your marketing? And it's the answers are all over the place in terms of sometimes there's a dedicated marketing person, sometimes there's a junior level marketing person who's maybe in their 20s and they're good at using Canva. Sometimes it's the director, sometimes it's the development director. It really just seems to fall on the shoulders of whoever is available. So if you are one of those people who is involved in the marketing process, and it's a little bit, I know that the world of marketing and social media can be very overwhelming. This is just a 90-minute workshop to walk you through some of the basic ways that you can, very simple things that you can do to elevate your marketing and present yourself very differently and in much more effective way to the public. And I know it looks a little confusing because it says 5-day museum marketing makeover, but basically it's showing you how in just 5 days, in under an hour a day, you can, again, significantly improve the way you're presenting yourself to the public. And it can start to unlock some of those questions that you have. And we'll have lots of time for Q&A. And I will also have lots of templates and easy to use guides for you. So I would love to have you guys there. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I usually would charge over $100 for something like this, but in today's economy, I want it to be really affordable, and I would love to see you there.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Awesome.
excited.
Well, hopefully everybody got a chance to get some good information, but also get yourselves ready for a little bit of origin story Q&A. Sounds like a fun little thing to do, right? All right, so I'm gonna go back and do we need the word cloud again? What do you
Maybe for
think?
a second.
Okay, I'm gonna put it back up just for a second, and then Carrie's gonna kind of walk us through one or two little things. And
here.
yeah, everybody go ahead. If you have a question, if you have a comment, you can either put it in the chat, raise your hand. We'll kind of start going through some of a little conversation about what you heard today. And if you want to kind of go further with it. see a nice comment in the chat right there talking about how my workshop is so fantastic. Maybe one of my core values is not being humble. Is that it? Sorry, but all right. Carrie,
Confidence is great. There's nothing wrong with confidence. You got to change that story, Beth.
hey, thank you. Thank you. I love that. All right. All right, good, good. Carrie, do you have a question to get us started?
Well, maybe we should start with the three favorite things, and get people thinking about how they can dive into collect evidence is what I call it.
Perfect.
If anyone would like to just talk to me a little bit about some core memories, there's no pressure. You can talk about whatever you want, but I'm going to help you just start to think about this from an individual perspective, and then show you how you can apply this also on an organizational level. I just need a volunteer. Don't be shy.
Well, I was thinking for me, one of my core values is service, and it's because of a core memory with doing a lot of service projects with my mom. My mom was very involved in the community, my Girl Scout leader, with church youth groups, those types of things. And so I, from a very young age, have been very involved in the community service, which is a reason why I'm in the nonprofit world, because it's all about giving back and service and community and things. So.
Amazing. Thank you so much for offering that. So when you're thinking about core memories and attaching them to your core values, sometimes they bubble up very easily, and sometimes it's a little bit more challenging because it's stuff that we haven't thought about in a while. Could I get another volunteer? And I'm going to actually ask you a couple of questions. I'm sorry. And how do you pronounce your name? I don't want to mispronounce it.
Tennille.
Neil, thank you so much for sharing that with us, because I think that that's a direct and easy correlation, and very exciting that you made that connection today. Could I get one more person I'll walk you through just a couple of easy questions.
Yeah, I would love to share. Let me turn my video real quick. Hi, so I'm Alex. I'm not a museum professional. I am currently a student working towards a master's degree in museum education.
Awesome. Okay,
But
before
I
you
would
go any further, I just want to ask you a couple of questions, and then I would love to hear if you made any other correlations as well.
Sure.
Okay, so could you tell me 3 of your favorite activities?
Just like in
Any-
general.
Yep.
Okay. Reading. Been reading a lot. Crafting. Like I do a lot of crafting and stuff. Gosh, I am walking. I probably walk like 3 to 4 miles a day just around my neighborhood.
Amazing. Okay, so for any of those 3 activities, could you tell me core memory related? And core memories do not have to be like when you were a child. It could be last week, or something
Sure.
that imprinted on you.
Yeah, I mean, definitely for reading. I grew up about 4 blocks away from my local library, so I used to go all the time. I even had the opportunity to volunteer with them through, from the ages of like 12 to 18, doing all manner of programming and stuff. So I had a really deep connection to my local library, which really solidified that passion for learning and reading and education. Um, for crafting, I mean, I guess it kind of, I mean, I've always been artsy, but it kind of kickstarted around the pandemic. That's when I learned how to crochet for the first time and cross stitch, and it just kind of spiraled out from there.
Awesome. Okay, so already, I don't know about the rest of the people who are listening, but I can hear a lot of values included in these activities, and a lot of material for thinking about ways in which you want to interact with the world, create community. The service part of it really stood out to me. And so when you're thinking about yourself, right, and your origin story, and thinking about looking for some of these core values, I start with 3 general activities because our job is not who we are, right? our background, these core memories that imprinted us are clues, are messages to our future self to say, pay attention to these important moments that are guiding us, right? Because I believe we cannot predict the future, right? Who knew I would be interacting with all of you on on screens virtually, you know, directing long distance and doing all these kinds of things. The world keeps changing, right? But our core values and who we are, the core of who we are, does not change our interests. So when you look at these core memories and think about those values that are impacted there and ponder a moment, what makes that so special to me? And can I bring that? This is the important part, and this is how it can apply organizationally as well. Can I bring that into the activities of my workplace or, you know, my daily life? Does it need to be something that's adjacent? Maybe I don't bring it directly into my job, but maybe I start a group to do that, or maybe I attend those things you know, as a hobby or part-time, but maybe the museum starts a walking group. Maybe the museum starts a book club. Maybe there are some ways that you can really infuse your role, your organization with some of these other interests because they speak to your core values as well. Right? Alex, I don't want to cut you off. I want to see if there was something you were prepared to say when you joined us. And so I don't want to cut off that core memory if you had anything else to
Oh,
add to that.
no, I was just, no, nothing really.
I hope that was helpful in just thinking
Mhm.
about some ways in which you can start to think about those core values and get back to the essence of who you really are. Before we started hearing all of that outside discussion, if you're a student, then you've been inundated with, this is the way the things are. This is the way that
Mhm.
they have to be. This is who you should be. This is how you should dress. This is what you should think,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So then I invite you to take some time to think, but who am I really? Right? Because the more
For
clear
sure.
we are about that, getting back to those values, the more we attract people, communities, and jobs that are in line, that are a good match for us, right? I get asked a lot, but aren't we going to alienate people if we're super clear? If I'm like, hi, I'm Carrie and I'm quirky. I'm okay with the fact that some people are not okay with that. It saves me a lot of time and energy in not trying to negotiate those relationships. And the people who are attracted to that and are open to that, they are now in my orbit. And I've kind of cleared out that algorithm, if you will, right? I call it changing your daily algorithm. Sending out that story and making sure we're clearing out and making space for those core values that we are aligned with.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Yeah, I mean, I'm just really inspired to learn from people who are in the museum space. You know, as a student, I'm always looking for like, well, how can I achieve my professional goals? And so, thank you for that. That was really helpful.
Absolutely.
And I think that kind of harkens back to how Carrie introduced herself too, is that, you know, when she came in to this world of leadership and things like that, there was this preconceived notion of who you needed to be when you were coming into leadership. And I felt the exact same thing when I got a promotion into a director level. And I was like, I gotta be, you know, ruling with an iron fist, and my team needs to follow me and all these things. And then I kind of, it got tiring because I had to give so much energy to who I wasn't,
Yeah.
you know, and then kind of looking back on like, no, I want my team to have collaborative efforts and I want to do things that empower other people and I want to make sure that their voices are heard and things like that. And then being a leader became so much more easy because it didn't feel like I had to be somebody who I wasn't, right? Ugh.
Absolutely. And part of that is knowing who you are and knowing the organization or the industry and making sure that everything's in alignment and that there's a match there, right? Because you also don't want to necessarily like walk into your job and you know, be acting in a way that is opposed to their core values, right? So it's very important to
Mhm.
understand what those core values are and what yours are, and to make sure, like I talk all the time about it being a good match, because sometimes you just have to agree to disagree and say, this isn't for me, or this, you know, this situation, and there are some things that you can change and there are some things that you cannot, right? So there's a reality check, in other words, involved in that, is being honest with yourself, and then, you know, kind of looking at the world. This is where the storytelling is really important right now. Things are changing, right? So we have to be very cognizant of the fact that things are not the same as they were 10 years ago. But if we're holding on to that story so tightly that we're not looking at the reality of a situation, then we're going to have a lot of conflict and tension, right? And so part of this process is saying, okay, this is who I am and these are my core values, or this is the organization's core values. How do they fit, and how do we negotiate and navigate the reality of where we are at the moment, right? So that might be changing perspective a little bit or adjusting the story a little bit.
Oh, that's good. That makes me think too about, taking, a couple steps back to this like organizational level too, and knowing that some of the museums that I've worked with in the past have had very strong viewpoints on certain things. And whether you call them, your three big principles or your core values or different things like that, there's lots of different ways to look at, how can you determine a few succinct things that you can continue to go back to when making decisions. Because I know that one of the big museums had decided to not have screens in their museum. And they kept going back to that when they had to do exhibit design, when they had to have outside people come in, things like that. Maybe there is an overarching value in the organization that you're going to be extremely sensory friendly. And I think sometimes too, like, I don't know, maybe my mind is just kind of going in this like curvy pathway of goodness, in that we've talked a lot about like personal origin, but also like that organizational core ideas. And it makes it so much easier in the future to answer questions, because you
Sure.
don't have to decide what the guiding force is. Once you have them determined on paper, everybody on the staff knows these are our core principles. We have our
Yeah.
mission statement, we have our vision statement, and these are our core principles that we're using as an organization to start creating programs, designing exhibits, having outreach programs. It just makes it easier to make a choice.
Absolutely. So there's a huge difference between, you know, a museum like a Touch Museum with a mission for, having those in-person live moments, versus a museum that has maybe a board of directors who's just like, traditionally, we have not had screens and we're not going to, I don't know where that voice came from, but traditionally, right? Without there's no story there. Traditionally is not a story. Well, it is a story. It's a holding on to the past. That's the story, right? So, we live in a world of technology. I've had many of these conversations, and just because we can doesn't mean we should, right? I wholeheartedly understand that. But if the story is we want to be relevant and we want to attract XYZ audience, right? If that is part of our mission and objective, then we can't hold on to traditionally, because those people, right, are not the same people who are entering your institution now. But if you
Mhm.
go back to the Touch Museum, it makes total sense because that is part of their values and mission. So I 100% agree that it is about that storytelling, but you have to dig down to understand those values, right? Traditionally doesn't speak to the values. There are values hidden behind traditionally that we need to examine, right? But tradition is not a value. It's a
Mhm.
habit.
Yeah, what we've always done.
Right.
Yes. Yes. All right. Who else has questions? I want to make sure that we have time for folks to rise up, ask a question. We had a bunch of them in the registration, so we know that they've been knocking around in your head. Whether it's a question about origins, principles, museums, or tapping into the hive mind that is in this room right now, you have a dying question inside about museums, feel free. It's good. Yeah, so right, Amanda. We all love to talk shop. It's good. We're here for a reason.
Hi, can I ask a question regarding experience, please?
Absolutely.
Hello, I'm Michael. I'm from Scotland, so it's quite late here.
Well, thank you for joining us, even from far and wide. We said that at the top of the call that we don't just have United States folks. We are a global collective here. So go ahead and ask us your question. What do you got?
Well, thank you for having me. I recently graduated from the University of Glasgow with a first in my undergrad degree in digital media and information studies, and I know that I want to work in museums, and I've been interviewing with several different organizations, including libraries, school libraries. There's also the Mitchell Library, which is like Europe's biggest library kind of thing. But the one thing I've been told is always that I don't have enough experience and I'm not able to get that experience. And I've been contacting people, even if it's just for like unpaid work or anything. And like the thing that I mentioned in my name is the Small Shot Museum in Paisley, and that just happens to be a thing that my friend's mum is working on. It's like it's like a small weaver's cottage, and I thought that would be good to kind of like just be able to kind of get some experience from that. But I'm really kind of struggling to get experience from more established institutes, and I was wondering, how do you get that experience that's required for jobs when you can't get the jobs to get the experience, kind of thing? And it's just to see what how you go about kind of breaking that cycle.
Absolutely. Good question. And I know that we have a lot of people that come on here that are museum newbies or they're getting ready. But I also know that we have people who join the call who are hiring folks. So I know that there is some expertise that's on the call. If you are a person who hires people, we want to hear your answer to this question. What would your recommendation be? Because I have some, but I want to hear from people who hire other people as well. My first recommendation is to go and volunteer at some places. I know that nonprofits are always looking for volunteers. It's not going to pay your bills. No, that stinks. But you're at least going to start building your resume with diverse opportunities, and you can ask questions. They might give you a little bit of professional development. But again, nonprofits are always looking for help. So you can get a volunteer position. Also, other things that if you're really, really trying hard to get in, think about the diversity of jobs. If you can start in as a part-time job, if you can get an internship, things like that in the industry. I know that every time I had a college intern that I was about to bring on for an unpaid internship, I would tell them right out, this is the longest job interview you will ever have. Because if you're here for an entire semester, I'm watching what you do and I'm helping you learn, and you get free passes all the time when you're an intern to help me guide you into what it's like to be a museum professional. And then at the end, if I'm super impressed, there might be an opportunity for a job at the end. But again, you're getting a museum on your resume, you're getting some experience, maybe even if it's just a front desk position, but you're getting to, pull back that curtain, see what's happening inside the museum, take as many opportunities as you can to be involved, go to all the staff trainings, different things like that. All right, anybody else on the call who hires people that might have suggestions?
I wanted to add something from the employee, the job seeker's perspective. And this is something I had done years ago. It was recommended from a book, and it felt really strange at first, but to just basically cold call and email people for informational interviews, just like, hey, I'm trying to break into this field. Could I pick your brain for 20 minutes? I'm sure your insight would be really valuable. And most people won't respond, but you will get some people who say, oh, sure, yeah, I love to talk about stuff like that. And I think generally people kind of like to talk about themselves. And I was surprised at how many yeses I got and how many job leads that it actually led to, and some that weren't even posted. They said, oh, well, we were thinking about hiring someone anyway, so it just started these conversations. And again, it's not the most comfortable thing to do, but I said, oh, well, I'm just going to do it. And again, I was surprised at how many yeses I did get and how many wonderful conversations I had. So I thought I would throw that out there as well.
I love that question when people ask me, tell me about your journey and how you got to where you are today. John, you've got something for us.
Well, yeah, it's interesting, Beth. Hi, by the way. It's interesting that you would mention volunteering and part-time jobs and internships, great ways to get into the field. I did them all. And I did it with the assistance of formal and informal mentors. In particular, I latched on to one person at the very first conference I went to, professional conference, back when I was in college still. And she helped guide my career for the next 5 years. I leaned on her for advice, and she openly said, feel free to use me as a reference. I did. I hooked onto her contacts, and it was invaluable in getting me started. I don't think I would have been able to get nearly as far if it hadn't been for that kind of encouragement and advice, and just the comfort level that I had knowing that I had somebody that I could lean on.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that suggestion too, because it also gives you that understanding that you're not alone. You always have a cheerleader who's ready to give you some support, but also you're at the forefront of their mind when somebody says oh, hey, I'm looking for somebody. You've got a cheerleader right there who's actually, I might have somebody. And then having a seasoned veteran on your reference list. I actually had this happen to me, and one of our regulars who couldn't be here today, she worked with me as a high schooler. And we just kind of kept in contact over the course of time. And by the time she applied for a job at a children's museum, I knew the education director at that children's museum, and I got on the phone right away and I said, do not let her leave your office. She is amazing and you need to hire her. So just the fact that that person facilitated a relationship with me and kind of leaned on me, I could give the most glowing recommendation. And now she's been promoted in that position twice. It's so cool to see those success stories of mentees and mentors. I love it. So good. Any other good advice or a question in our last just 3 minutes of the call today?
Hi.
Yes. Give it to me.
I'm Pam Meister, and from 2010 to 2022, I was director of the Mountain Heritage Center, which is Museum of Appalachian Culture and History at Western Carolina University. And we had lots and lots of interns, something we would always do because it was pretty much a sought after job. And so we would make them send us a resume. And sometimes they'd say, but we've never really had paid work. And we would say, think about things that you have done, in the community, that so often we'd find that people would museum curator, museum educator, and not think about all of the different kinds of skills and interests. And we would insist on bringing them in and doing an interview, and we would grill them about their life and what things they did. And frequently we'd find out, they worked with their church or they volunteered with organizations and things like that. So remember to think about yourself, not just as a potential curator, but as a whole person, and bring that whole person to you. And we would say, we will work out a job plan for you, and we will mentor you, and we will be with you, and you will have us not just for this semester, but for the rest of your career. And it's really worked out. Other thing too, something I found very good, and I've done that same bullying thing about, you really need to hire this person, they're amazing, hire them. But I found out in the last few years I was doing it, I would say, people would call and they'd do the reference check, and I'd say, do you have time to listen to a little story? And I would tell a story about that person that really illustrated something that was a desirable quality. That was the other thing too. When they would get interviews, would say, send us the job description, so when they call us, we can talk about why you were good at that stuff. And, and I swear, I don't think we missed yet. Every time we were able to tell a story, they got the job.
Oh, so good. I love how that's reframing, and thank you for calling me out on being a bully. I think that's so funny, but also absolutely for those of us
Bullying
who
for
are
a
references.
good purpose. Yeah.
Yes, and for those of us who are references to other people, say something like, can I tell you a story about when that person worked for me? Oh, so good, so good. Well,
Very
and also I
powerful.
loved how your comment kind of brought it all back in saying, think about the whole person and the qualities about that person, because that goes back to those origins, that goes back to the core values of the person and all the things that we learned today. And we are at time. So we thank you all so much for being here. We really, really appreciate you coming so many months again and again and again. 1 year of goodness has happened. Next month, we will be talking all about community partnerships and community collaborations. We're doing a revisit of a session that we did a long time ago, back in the day when we only had such a tiny little audience, but we started with this topic knowing, whoops, not the right one, knowing that collaboration is such a huge part of what we do as museum professionals and as museums. So we're going to go ahead and talk about coming together with your community to strengthen what you have in your museum. Maybe it's also to diversify what you can offer, because you may not have teaching capacity for certain things, and you can bring in a community partner, do it. Also a great way to save some money. Oh my gosh, so many good things about community partnerships. We're going to talk about them on April 9th. Make sure you sign up. We'll send an email out tomorrow. Thank you so much for giving us 2 extra minutes to talk about that. Love it. Thank you so much for coming. Have a wonderful day. Love it. Rainey, you have something else?
No, just thanks everyone. And thank you, Carrie. It was wonderful to have you here.
Carrie, thank you so much. We will see you all next month.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you.